She rejected a humble village teacher because she believed he would never become successful. She chose a wealthy businessman instead, convinced she had made the right decision. But 5 years later, the same teacher she once called just a village teacher stood before the entire nation as the Minister of Education. Now she had only one question. Had she rejected the love of her life, or the greatest man she would ever know? Watch this story until the very end to discover how a poor village teacher rose to the highest office, how one painful decision changed 2 lives forever, and why true success is measured by character, not money or status. In the peaceful village of Kasanga, nestled among the green hills of Uganda, there lived a humble young man named Daniel Okello. Daniel was 29 years old. Every morning before sunrise, he would ride his old bicycle along dusty roads to Kasanga Community Primary School, where dozens of children eagerly waited for him. The school was small. Its classrooms had cracked walls. The roof leaked whenever it rained. Many students shared one textbook between 3 children. Some arrived barefoot because their families couldn't afford shoes. Yet every morning, Daniel welcomed them with the same warm smile. Good morning, future doctors. Good morning, future engineers. Good morning, future presidents. The children laughed happily. To them, their teacher didn't just teach lessons. He gave them hope. Daniel believed one thing with all his heart. If you educate one child, you change one family. If you educate a generation, you change a nation. Most villagers admired his kindness, but many also mocked him. One afternoon, while Daniel repaired broken classroom desks himself, a wealthy businessman named Patrick Mwangi passed by. Patrick laughed. Daniel, you have a university degree. You speak perfect English. You could earn 10 times more in the city. So why waste your life here? Daniel smiled while tightening another screw. I'm not wasting my life. I'm building someone else's future. Patrick shook his head. You can't become rich teaching poor children. Daniel replied calmly. Not every successful life is measured by money. Patrick laughed again and walked away. In the same village lived Amina Nansabuga. She was intelligent, beautiful, and ambitious. After graduating from university with a degree in business administration, she dreamed of living in Kampala. Luxury apartments, expensive restaurants, business meetings, international travel. Village life felt too small for her dreams. Daniel had admired Amina since they were teenagers. Unlike many young men, he never tried to impress her with promises. Instead, he simply respected her. Whenever she visited the school to volunteer, Daniel quietly thanked her. Whenever village events needed organizers, they worked side by side. Slowly, their friendship grew. Many villagers believed they would eventually marry. Even Daniel secretly hoped they were right. One quiet evening, Daniel invited Amina to the old mango tree overlooking the village. It was the place where they often talked after church. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Children played football nearby. Birds returned to their nests. Daniel looked nervous. Amina, she smiled. Why do you look so serious? He took a deep breath. I've loved you for many years. I know I'm only a village teacher. I don't own a big house. I don't drive an expensive car. But I promise to love you with honesty, respect, and loyalty for the rest of my life. He reached into his pocket. Inside was a simple silver ring. Amina Nansabuga, will you marry me? For several seconds, she remained silent. Then she looked at the ring, at Daniel's worn shoes, at his old bicycle leaning against the tree. Finally, she sighed. Daniel, you're a wonderful man. But love isn't enough. His heart sank. She continued gently. I worked too hard to build a better future. I can't spend my life in a poor village. I want a husband with influence. Someone successful. Someone who can give me opportunities. Daniel tried to smile. I understand. But Amina wasn't finished. She spoke the words that would stay with him for years. I can't marry a village teacher. She handed back the ring. I'm sorry. Without another word, she walked away. Daniel stood alone beneath the mango tree until the sun disappeared beyond the hills. That night, Daniel visited his elderly grandmother, Mama Grace Okello. She found him sitting quietly outside her small house. You proposed it wasn't a question. Daniel nodded. She said no. Mama Grace smiled sadly. Does your heart hurt? He laughed softly. A little. The old woman sat beside him. When your grandfather proposed to me, he owned nothing except 2 goats. Daniel looked surprised. Really? She laughed. We built everything together. Then her expression became serious. Listen carefully, Daniel. Never become bitter because someone failed to see your value. Become better. One day, the right people will recognize what others overlooked. Those words stayed with him forever. Weeks later, the Ministry of Education announced a nationwide competition. Teachers from across Uganda were invited to submit innovative ideas for improving rural education. The winning proposal would receive government funding and national recognition. Daniel almost ignored the announcement. He doubted anyone would notice a village teacher, but his students encouraged him. Teacher Daniel, you always tell us to believe in ourselves. So why don't you believe in yourself? Those innocent words made him smile. That night, he stayed awake until dawn, writing researching planning. His proposal wasn't about expensive buildings. It focused on affordable community libraries, mobile classrooms, teacher training, and free digital learning for rural children. He mailed the proposal, then forgot about it. Life continued. Meanwhile, Amina accepted a job in Kampala. There she met Victor Kamau, a wealthy entrepreneur. Victor owned several businesses, luxury cars, modern offices, expensive suits. Everything Amina had once dreamed of. Within months, they began dating. Her friends congratulated her. You made the right choice. Daniel could never give you this life. Looking out from Victor's luxury apartment, Amina believed they were right. 3 months later, a government vehicle arrived unexpectedly at Kasanga Primary School. Children gathered excitedly. Teachers looked confused. A senior government official stepped out. He asked, "Is Mr. Daniel Okello here?" Daniel walked forward. "I'm Daniel." The official smiled warmly. "Congratulations. Out of more than 12,000 teachers across Uganda, your education proposal has been selected as the best in the country." The entire school erupted in cheers. The official continued, "The Minister of Education personally wants to meet you in Kampala next week." Daniel stood speechless. His students surrounded him, laughing and celebrating. But hundreds of kilometers away, Amina had no idea that the man she rejected because he was only a village teacher was about to begin a journey that would change not only his life, but the future of an entire nation. 1 week later, Daniel Okello stood outside the magnificent headquarters of Uganda's Ministry of Education in Kampala. It was the first time he had ever entered such an impressive building. Government officials hurried through the corridors. Television reporters waited outside conference rooms. Senior education experts discussed national policies. Daniel looked down at his simple navy blue suit. It wasn't expensive. His shoes had been polished so many times they had begun to fade. He quietly whispered to himself, "No matter where I stand, I'll never forget where I came from." A secretary opened the large conference room doors. Inside sat more than 20 senior officials, university professors, educational researchers, regional directors, and at the head of the table, the Minister of Education himself. Everyone expected another complicated academic presentation. Instead, Daniel began with a simple question. If a child is born in a poor village, should their dreams be smaller than those born in wealthy cities? Silence filled the room. He continued, "I've taught children who walk 10 kilometers every morning just to attend school. I've taught students who shared one pencil between 4 classmates. I've watched brilliant children leave school simply because their parents couldn't afford notebooks." He paused. The problem isn't talent. The problem is opportunity. The officials leaned forward. For the next hour, Daniel presented practical solutions. Community-built libraries, solar-powered digital classrooms, teacher mentoring programs, scholarships for rural girls, school feeding initiatives, low-cost technology for remote villages. When he finished, the room remained silent. Then, one by one, the officials stood and applauded. The minister smiled. "Mr. Okello, your proposal isn't just about education. It's about giving every child dignity." 3 months later, the government approved Daniel's plan, not nationwide, but as a pilot project across 20 rural districts. Daniel refused a comfortable office job in Kampala. Instead, he traveled from village to village, sleeping in simple guest houses, meeting teachers, listening to parents, walking through flooded roads to inspect schools. Children loved him because he remembered every name. Teachers respected him because he worked beside them. Whenever a classroom needed painting, he picked up a brush. Whenever desks needed repairing, he grabbed a hammer. Journalists often asked, "Why don't you let workers do this?" Daniel smiled. A leader should never ask others to do work they're unwilling to do themselves. Those words spread quickly across social media. Soon, people across Uganda began calling him the people's teacher. Amina's life looked perfect from the outside. She now worked as a marketing executive for one of Victor Kamau's companies. She wore elegant business suits, attended expensive dinners, posted glamorous photos online. Her friends admired her lifestyle. But behind closed doors, things were different. Victor cared more about business than people. He canceled dinner dates for meetings, forgot birthdays, dismissed her opinions during conversations. Whenever she suggested supporting charities, Victor laughed. Charity doesn't increase profits. One evening, she quietly asked, "Don't you ever think about helping others?" Victor looked up from his laptop. "I built my wealth for myself, not for strangers." His answer stayed with her. For the first time, she remembered Daniel. He had once spent an entire weekend repairing the roof of an elderly widow's house without accepting a single coin. Back then, she thought it was foolish. Now, she wasn't so sure. 6 months later, television screens across Uganda broadcast an inspiring story. The headline read, "Village Teachers' Education Plan Transforms Rural Schools." Children who once studied beneath trees now had classrooms. Attendance rates doubled. Exam results improved dramatically. Parents volunteered to help schools. Communities united. The reporter smiled at the camera. And leading this remarkable transformation is education specialist Daniel Okello. Amina froze. There he was, standing in front of smiling children, still wearing simple clothes, still smiling the same way he always had. Victor glanced at the television. "Interesting fellow," Amina quietly replied. "I know him." Victor barely looked up. "Really? He seems intelligent." She whispered. "He always was." Success brought many opportunities. Private schools offered Daniel six-figure salaries. International organizations invited him abroad. Educational companies wanted him as a consultant. One company even offered him a luxury house and a brand new SUV. Daniel politely declined every offer. His friends thought he was crazy. One asked, "Why keep refusing? You deserve a better life." Daniel smiled. "I already have one. My happiness isn't waiting in a bigger office. It's waiting inside every classroom where a child discovers their potential." Time passed quickly. 5 years changed everything. The pilot program expanded nationwide. Millions of children benefited. Thousands of schools were renovated. Teacher training improved dramatically. International organizations praised Uganda's educational reforms. Daniel became one of Africa's most respected education experts. Yet, he still returned to Kasanga every month. He still visited his old classroom. He still rode his bicycle through the village whenever he came home. Children would run toward him shouting, "Teacher Daniel." He greeted every one of them. He never allowed success to change his heart. One quiet evening, the president called a national press conference. Television stations interrupted regular programming. Citizens gathered around radios and televisions. The president stepped to the podium. "Our children deserve the very best. Our education system deserves visionary leadership. Today, I am honored to appoint a man whose work has transformed millions of lives as Uganda's new Minister of Education." The cameras turned. Walking calmly toward the stage was Daniel Okello, the same village teacher, the same humble man, the same bicycle-riding educator. Journalists erupted with questions. Flash cameras lit up the room. Back in Kampala, Amina watched the announcement live. Her coffee cup slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. She whispered in disbelief. Daniel. 5 years earlier, she had refused to marry him because he was only a village teacher. Now, the entire nation stood and applauded him as the Minister of Education. At that exact moment, Victor walked into the room. He glanced at the television, then frowned. His company had recently been trying to win a massive government education contract. And now, the man approving education reforms was the very same teacher Amina once rejected. Victor slowly turned toward her. "You said you knew him?" Amina nodded silently. Victor smiled. "Good. Because I think it's time you introduced me to the minister." Amina looked at him. For the first time, she realized Victor wasn't interested in Daniel. He was interested in Daniel's power. And deep inside, she began wondering if she had made the biggest mistake of her life. The announcement spread across Uganda like wildfire. Television stations replayed the ceremony every hour. Newspapers carried the same headline on their front pages. Former village teacher Daniel Okello sworn in as Uganda's new Minister of Education. Across villages, towns, and cities, people celebrated. Teachers felt proud. Parents felt hopeful. Children smiled because one of their own had reached the highest office in education without forgetting where he came from. But for one person, the news felt heavier than anyone could imagine. Amina. She sat alone in her apartment that night, staring at the television screen. Daniel stood confidently at the podium, speaking with the same humility he had always carried. This appointment is not my success alone. It belongs to every teacher who has walked through mud to reach a classroom, every parent who sacrificed for their child's education, and every child who refused to give up despite impossible circumstances. Tears slowly filled Amina's eyes. She whispered, "He never changed." Only the world finally noticed him. A week later, Victor Kamau entered Amina's office carrying a gold-colored invitation. "You're coming with me." She looked confused. "Where?" "The National Education Investment Summit." She opened the invitation. At the bottom were the words, "Guest of Honor, Honorable Daniel Okello, Minister of Education." Her heart skipped a beat. Victor smiled. "This is the perfect opportunity." She quietly asked, "For what?" Victor answered confidently, "My company wants a billion-shilling contract to build digital classrooms." He looked directly at her. "And you already know the minister." Amina immediately shook her head. "I won't use him." Victor laughed. "Don't be naive. Everyone uses connections." She remained silent. Deep inside, she knew Daniel would never approve contracts because of friendship. The Grand Conference Hall in Kampala was filled with over 2,000 guests, government officials, foreign ambassadors, university professors, business leaders, teachers from every district, media organizations from across Africa. As cameras flashed, Daniel entered the hall. Everyone stood. The applause lasted nearly 2 minutes. Yet despite the attention, he greeted security guards before greeting politicians. He shook hands with school janitors. He stopped to hug elderly teachers who had inspired him years earlier. Nothing about his character had changed. Amina watched from a distance. The same warm smile, the same calm voice, the same humble heart. Only now, millions admired what she had once overlooked. After delivering his keynote speech, Daniel walked through the reception hall greeting guests. Suddenly, his eyes met Amina's. Time seemed to stop. 5 years disappeared in a single moment. She slowly walked toward him. "Congratulations, Minister." Daniel smiled gently. "You don't have to call me Minister. I'm still Daniel." She laughed softly through her nervousness. "I suppose some things never change. Some things shouldn't." There was no anger in his voice. No bitterness. Only kindness. She looked down. "I've wanted to apologize for years." Daniel shook his head. "You already apologized once. You don't have to keep carrying that burden." Before she could answer, Victor confidently approached them. "Minister Okello." Daniel extended his hand politely. "It's nice to meet you." Victor smiled broadly. "I've heard wonderful things about you." Daniel replied, "Thank you." Victor immediately handed him a business folder. "My company specializes in educational infrastructure. We'd love to partner with your ministry." Daniel accepted the folder. "I appreciate your interest. Our procurement process is completely transparent. Every company will compete fairly." Victor's smile weakened. "I understand. But perhaps we could arrange a private discussion?" Daniel answered calmly. "Everything related to government projects is discussed through official channels. No exceptions." Victor forced another smile. "Of course." But inside, he was frustrated. His plan had failed. Later that afternoon, Daniel visited an exhibition showcasing innovative learning materials created by rural schools. One small boy accidentally bumped into him, spilling paint across Daniel's expensive suit. The child froze in fear. I'm sorry, sir." Everyone expected security to intervene. Instead, Daniel knelt beside the frightened boy. He smiled. "Did the paint ruin your artwork?" The boy shook his head. "No." Then nothing important was lost. The hall became silent. A journalist captured the moment. By evening, the photograph had gone viral across Africa. The caption read, "A true leader protects a child's confidence before protecting his clothes." Amina saw the picture online. She smiled through tears. "This is the man I once believed wasn't successful enough." That evening, Victor became furious. Inside his luxury apartment, he threw the proposal onto the table. He embarrassed me. Amina looked shocked. He simply followed the law. Victor scoffed. People in power always make exceptions. He refused because he wanted to look honest. She stared at him. No. He refused because he is honest. Victor slammed his fist on the table. You still admire him, don't you? She remained silent. Victor laughed bitterly. I knew it. You regret choosing me. She quietly replied. I regret choosing money over character. Those words echoed through the apartment. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, Victor removed the engagement ring from his pocket. I think we both know this relationship is over. Amina nodded. Not because she wanted Daniel back, but because she finally understood that a relationship built on ambition alone could never survive without respect. A few weeks later, Daniel returned to Kasanga village to inaugurate a newly built secondary school. Thousands of villagers gathered. Among them, Amina stood quietly near the back of the crowd. She watched as Daniel hugged his former students, greeted elderly neighbors, and spent time talking with children. Even after becoming a minister, he still remembered every teacher by name. He still visited his grandmother's house first. He still rode his old bicycle through the village before entering any official vehicle. After the ceremony, Mama Grace smiled at Daniel. You've traveled the world. You've met presidents. But you're still my grandson. Daniel laughed. And I'll always be. Nearby, Amina quietly wiped away another tear. She finally understood what true greatness looked like. It wasn't power. It wasn't fame. It wasn't wealth. It was remaining humble when the whole world celebrated you. Just then, Daniel's chief secretary hurried toward him with an urgent file. Minister, we have a serious problem. Daniel looked concerned. What happened? The secretary lowered his voice. We've uncovered evidence that several senior contractors have been stealing millions from the National School Construction Program. And one of the companies under investigation, he paused, belongs to Victor Kamau. Daniel's expression became serious. At that moment, Amina realized the past wasn't finished with either of them, and the hardest chapter of their lives was only just beginning. The secretary handed Daniel a thick investigation file. Its pages contained financial records, bank transfers, forged signatures, fake construction reports, and photographs of unfinished schools that had already been marked as completed. Daniel slowly closed the file. His heart sank. Thousands of children had been denied proper classrooms because someone chose greed over their future. He looked at his secretary. How much money is missing? The secretary took a deep breath. Nearly 120 billion Ugandan shillings. Daniel remained silent. Then he asked the question that mattered most. How many schools could that money have built? The answer broke everyone's heart. More than 400. Daniel looked out of the window. He imagined thousands of children still studying beneath trees, walking miles every morning, sharing broken desks. Not because the country lacked resources, but because someone had stolen their future. That evening, Daniel called an emergency meeting. Senior investigators, auditors, anti-corruption officials, police commanders, the attorney general. Everyone filled the conference room. Daniel stood before them. His voice was calm but firm. I don't care who is involved. If it's my closest friend, if it's a government minister, if it's a billionaire, if they stole from our children, they must face justice. The room fell completely silent. One official nervously asked, Sir, one of the main suspects is Victor Kamau. Daniel nodded. I know. The official continued. His former fiancée, Amina, used to know you personally. Daniel looked directly at him. My personal history has no place in this investigation. The law must treat everyone equally. For that moment, every person in the room understood why Daniel had become minister. News of the investigation spread across the country. Banks froze Victor's company accounts. Government contracts were suspended. Investors demanded explanations. Employees began resigning. Within days, the media camped outside his headquarters. Television reporters shouted questions. Did your company steal education funds? Why were schools left unfinished? Where is the missing money? Victor refused to answer. Inside his office, he stared at photographs of the luxury life he once enjoyed. Private jets, sports cars, luxury villas. Everything suddenly felt meaningless. For the first time, he understood something Daniel had always known. A fortune built without honesty can disappear overnight. When Amina learned the truth, she was devastated. She remembered every conversation she had ignored, every warning she had dismissed, every time Victor laughed at kindness. She quietly walked into the anti-corruption office. "I have information." The investigators looked surprised. She handed them emails, financial records, meeting schedules, documents Victor had once asked her to organize. "I didn't know what he was doing at the time. But if this helps recover money meant for children, you can have everything." One investigator asked, "Do you realize what this means?" She nodded. "It means doing what's right." Months later, the trial became one of the most watched court cases in Uganda. Evidence after evidence was presented. Fake invoices, bribery records, illegal payments, witness testimony. Finally, the judge delivered the verdict. Victor Kamau and several corrupt executives were found guilty of embezzling public education funds. Long prison sentences followed. The stolen assets were confiscated. Much of the recovered money was redirected to complete the unfinished schools. Outside the courthouse, journalists surrounded Daniel. "Minister, how do you feel after today's verdict?" Daniel answered quietly, "This isn't a victory. It's a reminder. When adults become greedy, children pay the highest price." His words appeared on newspaper front pages the next morning. 1 year later, construction finished on Uganda's largest rural teacher training academy. It was named the Hope Education Institute. Thousands gathered for its grand opening. Teachers, students, parents, government officials, international guests. Daniel stood before the crowd. Behind him, hundreds of children waved small Ugandan flags. He smiled warmly. "When I was a village teacher, people asked why I stayed. They believed success meant leaving villages behind." He paused. "But I discovered something. The future of a nation begins in its smallest classroom." Thunderous applause filled the campus. Then he surprised everyone. "This institute will provide free training for rural teachers. No talented child should lose a good teacher because of poverty." Many in the audience wiped away tears. As the ceremony ended, Amina quietly approached Daniel. The years had changed them both. She looked at him with peaceful eyes. "I'm proud of you." Daniel smiled. "Thank you." She laughed softly. "You know, when you proposed beneath that mango tree, I thought I was choosing a better future." He listened silently. "I've spent years realizing I wasn't rejecting a poor teacher. I was rejecting a man with one of the richest hearts I've ever known." Daniel looked toward the students celebrating nearby. "We all make choices." She nodded. "I've learned from mine." There was no bitterness between them, only honesty. She smiled gently. "I've started a nonprofit organization. We help girls from poor villages stay in school." Daniel's face brightened. "That's wonderful." She continued. "I wanted my regret to become something useful." Daniel extended his hand. "I'm proud of you too." For a moment, they simply stood there, not as two people trying to relive the past, but as two adults who had grown because of it. The Hope Education Institute had trained more than 30,000 teachers. School attendance reached record levels. Thousands of girls received scholarships. International organizations praised Uganda's education reforms. Yet every year, on the first day of school, Daniel still visited Kasanga Community Primary School. He entered the same old classroom where his journey began. The cracked walls had been replaced. The leaking roof was gone. Children now had computers, books, bright desks, a modern library. As he walked through the classroom, he noticed an old wooden desk preserved in one corner. It was the very desk he had repaired years earlier with his own hands. A young student asked, "Minister Daniel, why do you keep that broken desk?" Daniel smiled. "Because it reminds me where every dream begins." The child thought for a moment. Can someone from a small village really change a whole country? Daniel knelt beside him. He smiled with the same warmth he had shown years ago as an ordinary teacher. "Never let where you start. Decide where you finish." The classroom erupted in applause. Outside, hundreds of children ran across the playground, laughing, dreaming, believing, and somewhere beyond the school, the old mango tree still stood, a quiet reminder of the day one woman rejected a village teacher, never knowing that his greatest achievement would never be becoming a minister. It would be inspiring millions of children to believe that education, integrity, and humility can change the world. If you were Amina, would you have had the courage to admit your mistake and spend years making a positive difference? Or would you have accepted your regret and moved on? Share your honest answer in the comments. I read every one.